You remember that bumper sticker that used to be everywhere for a while? Still, you see it from time to time. Practice random acts of kindness and senseless beauty. That's very appealing. Because the goal of our lives should be to live with spontaneous concern for those that we see around us, to make a difference to the people that we come into contact with. And something that can be frustrating is how few and far between those opportunities can be. It can feel like we have a lot of have-tos and not so many want-tos in our lives. And then as we start to pay attention, we can find that some of the want-tos actually aren't so reliable. How many times have you been asked by someone, well, why did you do that? And you sort of have that blank, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. 10-year-old boys get asked that on a daily basis, right? But it still continues on where we actually start to, at a certain point, distrust the impulses, even though we know that that's where we want to be. And that's what our story is about. That's what this whole Jacob story is about. And it's the beginning of an exploration of Jacob's development. And today we're going to look at those feuding brothers and why Jacob, the manipulative, controlling younger brother, ends up being the hero of this story. It's important to see how low Jacob started from, so that when we see him change, it's not just a Pollyanna story where everything was pretty and it was easy, but no, it was actually really hard, and the Lord worked a miracle. So, some brothers get along, others do not. Clearly, Jacob and Esau were in this latter category. Even when they were in the womb together, they were in conflict. And Rebekah wanted to know why. Reading from Genesis, but the children struggled together within her, and she said, if all is well, why am I like this? So she went to inquire of Jehovah, and Jehovah said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples will be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Now that conflict is really apparent in the story, and it continues through our whole story until a resolution right at the end. And I should note that this prophecy, the older shall serve the younger, was quite a shocking thing to say in that culture. Primogeniture was a really strong thing. You were the oldest brother, you were obeyed. It's not far off from saying a blind man could be the quarterback of a Super Bowl team. It just didn't happen. Oldest brother, you listen to him. And one of the interesting themes of Scripture is that this shows up quite a lot because the Lord was making an important statement. You see Joseph, the 11th of 12 brothers, being in charge of his brothers in the end. You see Ephraim, Joseph's son, gaining ascendance over his older brother Manasseh. And the tribe of Ephraim was dominant over the tribe of Manasseh all through Israel's history. You see David becoming king in preference to his older brothers. You see Moses leading the children of Israel, where Aaron, his older brother, was not the one chosen. And it's getting at an important theme about our spiritual lives, and it has to do with a frustration many of us have felt, which is we want to do good things. We want to be loving, but actually getting to or from that want to loving actions that actually work, that carry out what we want, seems hard. And it turns out that the path to love actually involves the rules a lot more than we want, and it even involves some of that calculating self-interest that Jacob is depicting. It's not fun to have internal conflict and turmoil, is it? You know, Rebecca said, if all is well, why am I like this? I don't want it to be this way. And perhaps you've had that experience of being tugged in two different directions in your spirit. I want to do this, but I know I should do this. I feel like I should forgive this person, or my mind says I should forgive this person. I'm not ready there yet. You know, we have these different sides, and a lot of times it's a head-heart type thing. And that's a depiction, that's what Esau and Jacob depict. Okay? So Esau, he was born hairy enough that Jacob could pretend to be like him by putting goat skins on his arms to steal the blessing. He was a strong-feeling man. He was vigorous. He was a hunter who acts without planning. Jacob, smooth-skinned, a man of tents. In other words, he stayed close to home. He was not an outdoorsman. He was a planner. And we see their characters in the stories that I read. You know, his brother comes home on the brink of death, or so he feels, and Jacob is not willing to give his brother a pot of stew without bargaining with him. Half his inheritance, the oldest son got a double portion. So you'd have divided Isaac's wealth into three. Esau would have gotten 2 parts. Isaac was a very wealthy man, so I just picked $500,000 to the kids, but he was a very wealthy man, so this was a lot of money. And then when Rebecca says, I want you to impersonate Esau and receive the blessing, Jacob did not say, I shouldn't do that. He says, but I'll get caught. That was his entire conversation. Can I get away with this? So you can imagine that Jacob might have been pretty successful in certain kinds of business because he was always looking out for the main chance. By contrast, Esau is the kind of guy who would go out hunting and stay out so long that without preparation that he comes home and feels like I'm about to die. And he is the kind of person who would impulsively give away half his inheritance rather than, go looking around. He was back home. There were probably people. He's impulsive, not calculating enough. So this is the conflict between head and heart. The goal of our lives, depicted in this story, is that we have this inner desire for good, that's Isaac, and then we manifest that in loving actions to the people around us, that's Esau. Now, you and I know sometimes you try to do good things and it doesn't work out as well. And part of the problem is that when we start out in any endeavor, that external is a little ungoverned. It's impulsive. It wants to do good, but it doesn't really know how. It's the part of us that'll do something that we know is wrong because, we don't want to upset our friends. We want everybody to feel happy. That feels like doing good, not necessarily very wise. Or it's the part of us that'll go on a diet or start exercise only to impulsively sabotage that effort. So when we start out trying to live a good life, we have this good intention, but this external part is gullible. It's easily led, and it's not directed properly. And the gap between that inner desire and our ability to carry it into action needs to be bridged by Rebecca and Jacob, which is the more intellect side. And you saw them planning, plotting, looking ahead. That's what our minds do. Stealing the blessing was not exactly a high point in either of their lives, right? But it reflects the ability of the intellect to see a goal and go through the necessary steps to get us there. It's something that can focus our attention. Not a lot of warmth, but some pretty good calculation. Now, stepping back for a second, isn't it amazing that Jacob is the hero of the story? Think about the Lord looking at us and loving us. And he sees that inner intention. He sees Isaac. And then he also sees all this other stuff that is messy and self-interested and not something that we're proud of at all. And yet he works with us. He's able to take us on this journey such that we can get, at the very end of our story, from Isaac to Esau. It's just such a wonderful picture of the Lord's mercy. So one of the really striking things about the story is how much Jacob has transformed. We see him today, not very pretty. Next week, we'll see him having a transcendent spiritual experience, and he ends up bargaining with the Lord. He doesn't say, "Wow, Lord, I'll do what you want." He bargains with him. Then he falls in love, and that's pretty good. But then he starts playing games to get as many of Laban's sheep as he can. But in the end, you see Jacob coming down and bowing in front of Esau. You get the proper order, which we all know, which is that we are creatures of our affections. And it's marvelous to see that the Lord saw all these things that were needed and took him through them. So one takeaway from today is you could, look at your own lives and sometimes see that cold calculating part. You can notice that you walk into a social event and say, "I hope this is going to be fun." And there's this other part of you that said, I wonder if I could make it fun for other people. We're going to notice that Jacob part, and sometimes we're going to feel despondent. And the Lord knows that our motives in that lower self are not great. And he works with us. And a lot of that working with us is saying, walk the walk, worry about motives tomorrow. Just do what you need to do. So we come back to this dialogue of, well, what's in charge? Because we know in the end, who you are is what you love. What you know and don't live is just gathering dust on shelves in your memory. Amounts to nothing. And yet truth plays a vital role. And here's the way the Lord in New Church teaching puts it. Truth is first in time, while good is first in end. That which is first in end is actually first because it's primary, and therefore also firstborn, while that which is first in time is not actually first, but only apparently so. So what we want, that goal, that Isaac, part of ourselves, is who we are. And the goal is always to have Esau inherit. But in time, we focus on the rules. We focus on what's right. We focus on, sorry, I was here before you. Too bad. I get this. Another way that this is described is that when we start out, we focus on truth in the same way that when you build a house, you put a foundation down. Now, you've all seen empty foundations. They're utterly useless until you put a house on them. The goal is good, the living in the house. But you need to lay down those structures in your life, the rules, the even calculating rules. So I want to help others. I want to make a difference. I want to really see the good in other people. That's the dream. That's blind Isaac. And now I need to discipline myself to figure out how to do that with my particular gift set. How do I do that? What are the rules that I need to be obeying so that it's not just me telling you what I would do, which actually has no benefit to you because you're really different from me. I want to get married. I see this person. It's going to be bliss and joy. Love conquers all, right? That's Isaac. But then I come face to face with the fact that I have no idea how to love this other person properly. And so I have to learn these skills, listening, compromise, how to act with integrity with someone who's really different from me. There's a lot of rule stuff that comes into play where if anybody were able to peel back the layers of my soul, they'd say, I'm not really that into doing these rule things, but it's necessary for peace in the home. And I may start just so that I don't catch it. But in the process of obeying those rules, a miracle starts to happen. I actually start to want to do those very things that I was putting on. So something that we're going to be just needing to remember through this whole story is that Jacob is Isaac's son. Blind Isaac is in charge. We have these ideals and goals that we want to do. And then we go through this incredibly messy seeming process on the way that looks self-serving. And yet the Lord is making something awesome happen. Because there is that hope, that wish that doesn't see how to accomplish anything. So here's an important teaching about this. In the absence of matters of doctrine, so truth, knowledge, the good of life does indeed exist, but it is not as yet truly spiritual, except in the sense that it has the potentiality to become so. So until you know truth, until you're applying truth, you're blind Isaac. You just have that part of you that wants, but absolutely no ability to help. And I'm sure you've had that just thousands of times in your life where I see someone, I want to help. I have no idea how. That's how we start. Those who are being regenerated, first of all, do good as matters of doctrine direct them, for they do not of themselves know what good is. And what that's saying is we first start doing it because it's the rules. And anybody who's parented children know that there are a whole bunch of times when you say, I know you don't understand this. This is the rules. You'll see this later. Just get your external life into this order. They learn to do good from matters of doctrine concerning love and charity. And from these they know who the Lord is, who the neighbor is, and what love is, and what charity is. So if you think back on your life, you've always known the basics. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, all of those things. Any 5-year-old knows those. But you don't really know them. You know them when grown-ups are present. But when the grown-ups leave, they're gone. And so you end up with children behaving very differently because they haven't internalized that stuff that everybody knows. And that's what so much of parenting is coming back and back and back to the same things, helping people understand not that it's a rule, but why it's a rule, and how it's a rule that's actually a rule of love. But that takes time and practice, and that's the Jacob story. So in our story today, Jacob totally doesn't get it. He's after the birthright, the blessing. And so when we start our lives, any individual endeavor, most disagreements, a lot of social events, we're coming in saying, what do you got for me, life? What do you have for me? And perhaps like Jacob, we end up pushing it too far. Jacob had to run for his life. We'll see that in the next story. So what does that part of us bring to the table? That intellect part, that ambitious part. Well, it brings some discipline. Our hearts are not disciplined. Our hearts are spontaneous, senseless beauty. That's wonderful, but it needs more. Jacob's the kind of person who will say, I will make sure that I have enough food. I'm not going to come starving to the point where I do reckless things. Even if I don't use that food well, I will have it. I will learn the facts. I will be, even if part of me is focused on being right more than on being helpful, on how those facts benefit me, I will know them, and that's a building block. And this part of us also has focus. Maybe it's because I want to win. Maybe it's because I want to be popular or right or liked. But I'll do the work. I'm not going to self-sabotage. I'll show up. That's Jacob. Really, really good qualities. Not enough, but enough to get us started. So maybe you look at your life and you'll notice some Jacob, some places where you put self-interest far too far into the foreground of your thinking. Maybe you'll cringe. But then again, you can also look at the other side and see the Esau moments where you've had this great impulse that you just never carried through. And you've self-sabotaged again and again for lack of grit, for lack of focus. Maybe you'll cringe at that side. And then you can come back to that Jacob side and say, in our story, the Lord is saying, yeah, these motives are not very exalted. But this is the path that moves you forward because you're willing to do, you're willing to actually carry out the actions. This is the part that has that mental discipline. Sometimes we see the not great motives and say, start over, toss that whole thing out. I'm going to work on getting my motives right. And the Lord would turn that around and say, no. Do that thing. Yes, the motives aren't great. Okay, so ambition's driving that. That is okay. Do the right thing. Keep on doing it. Have the discipline. And when you do that, the Lord will be able to make his miracles happen. And that's what we're going to be observing for the next little while. And we have Holy Supper in a few minutes. And one of the really powerful aspects of Holy Supper can come when we see parts of ourselves that we're not proud of and try to invite the Lord in. And this Jacob part, this pragmatic, I can get stuff done part is a great part to invite the Lord in because he's got the external tools. Now he just needs Isaac pushing in from the inside, making that stuff turn into something really good.